I've been wearing almost entirely barefoot shoes now for almost 6 years. And on the 19th of June 2023, I had an email from Vivo Barefoot. They wanted to see if I would try out their all-new training shoe before they released it to the market. Actually, I've not made a shoe video since I got them. I've got to be honest, I'm super passionate about barefoot and I absolutely love training. I'm very passionate about training. It's what I do for work. It's what I do for life. So getting a free pair of barefoot shoes from the leading company in this space, and specifically for training before its pre-release or before its launch, was like mad exciting for me. It's been over a year now since they sent me those shoes. They're not paying me to make this video. They've got no idea that I'm making this video. I don't have any sort of deal with them or anything like that, but I feel like I've got some unfinished business. Now, since the email and getting these shoes, I've absolutely worn them to death. Disaster struck. I've worn these, I've worn the Primus Light a little bit, and I've worn my Tracker Deacons a little bit as well, but mostly I've been in these. In the early days going barefoot, I definitely felt I was getting stronger in terms of my feet week on week on week. But now I've got to be honest, I don't really feel like I'm getting any more strength in terms of my feet, my proprioception, and that kind of makes sense, right? There's no progressive overload. Once you get to a certain point where my foot strength is able to cope with the demands of being barefoot, then I'm not really going to gain any more strength because I'm not adding any extra load over time. I'm not exactly walking or standing up any more duration in terms of time either, and I'm not doing it any more frequently either. Although maintaining healthy and strong feet and balance and proprioception is awesome. I've also switched from running in barefoot shoes for the most part to running in ultras. Now these are zero drop shoes. They've got a wide toe box so the feet can spread, but they are cushioned. So they maintain some of the similarities and some of the reasons for going barefoot, but they are cushioned. If you want to know why that is, you might want to watch this video after watching this one. I do wear barefoot shoes every single day pretty much. They're my casual shoe, they're my work shoe. I stand in them all day in the gym. I'm often on my feet. And I wear them for what I can only describe as hybrid style training. So I do a little bit of lifting, there's a little bit of dynamic stuff in there, there's a little bit of endurance stuff, and I do still sprinkle in a little bit of running in them. And generally they're absolutely awesome for all of those things. I would never go back to traditional type shoes. And to be honest, I probably couldn't go back to traditional type shoes because my forefoot is kind of spread. And so therefore I probably wouldn't be able to fit in traditional shoes unless I got some extra wide fitting ones. Unlike using a running shoe or a traditional trainer, when it comes to working out and training, there's obviously no cushioning. So there's no compression, there's no wobbling, there's no loss of force transfer. When you're wearing a barefoot shoe, you're very close to the floor, so you can transfer force through the floor very well, but you've also got nothing in between you and the floor. So in terms of like instability, there just isn't that. It's as stable as it's going to get. When you're lifting heavy and you've got a running shoe on, maybe you've got a barbell on your back, if the running shoe foam compresses to the right hand side, for example, then that causes you to wobble and it's a little bit more unstable. So I definitely wouldn't go back to training in a running shoe or anything similar to that. For the most part, they're also super flexible and super light when you compare them with traditional type shoes, which is awesome if you're doing anything like dynamic movements. Maybe you're doing walking lunges, maybe you're doing burpees, maybe you're doing box jumps, maybe you're doing kind of like clean and jerks where you're a bit more dynamic in nature, and just them being a bit lighter and a bit more flexible just makes those things a bit more fluid and kind of effortless. And you've got a really wide base and it allows you to use your foot strength to stabilize like my 85 kilo mass, for example, rather than trying to rely on a pair of shoes to kind of stabilize me doing all of these different movements. Now, here's why in particular these are my absolute favorite shoe, particularly for training and hybrid style training and hybrid style lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. And potentially one thing that sucked about these as well. First of all, the grip. Now, the grip on these ones looks very similar to the Primus Light, or the tread pattern does. They're not massive lugs or much dissimilar to the Primus Light, but I do find these to be like extra grippy compared to the Primus Light. I don't really know why that is. It might be because the rubber almost feels a bit softer. So it's almost a bit like that gum rubber that you see on like a badminton shoe or something like that, where it almost like heats up a little bit and then that rubber becomes a bit stickier. So I don't think the tread pattern necessarily makes it much grippier, but I think possibly the type of rubber it is which is obviously great when you're doing anything like sled work, or you're doing any lateral jumps, or jumping forwards or backwards, or burpees, or those sorts of things. Now, historically, one thing that's kind of sucked with some Vivo Barefoot shoes is like the stitching. So like the sole coming away from the upper. And I ultimately think that's down to the fact that you have a very breathable, flexible upper, which is awesome. And you have the same in terms of the sole, but the sole is obviously going to be harder because it needs to be puncture protection. So, you know, if you're stepping on glass, you don't want it to be super thin and lightweight and stuff. So you do have this kind of disparity where the upper is often very flexible, very like kind of, you know, thin, lightweight, breathable, and all of those good things which we want. But then also it's connecting to something that's a little bit harder despite still being quite flexible. So often what you would get over time is the sole would come away from the upper. This just hasn't happened at all with this shoe, which is like absolutely awesome. Now, I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think one of them is being, you can see the sole comes up a little bit higher onto the upper. And I think when it flexes and stuff, that just means that there's less kind of like pinch areas almost where it could kind of come away. You've got a bit more kind of connection where it attaches to the upper, and it might be out of the way of those pinch points. The other thing is, this one in particular, this kind of motor strength shoe, is the upper has got lots more sort of like rubber construction. So you have the rubber sole connecting to rubber construction as opposed to the rubber sole connecting to like a knit fabric, for example. So I think that's another reason why, you know, it kind of sticks on there, and ultimately that means the durability for these bad boys is maybe way longer than a Primus Light or other kind of barefoot shoes out there. And ultimately that is a challenging thing. It's a trade-off between like performance and durability. When we're looking at something to move and be so flexible and be very lightweight, there's obviously going to be trade-offs there, but I think this has almost done it in a, you know, pretty much perfect way. With that though, and the upper on these being more rubber than like the Primus knit, for example, or other knit barefoot shoes, obviously that kind of hinders the breathability to a certain extent. But what I think they've done really well is you've got plenty of these kind of like air vents. So you've got one big one here on the side, then you've got two at the front, and then you've got one on this side as well. And actually the tongue and all around the heel is like a knit material anyway, so that's fairly breathable as well. So I think they've got like a really good balance there as to keep it, you know, as breathable as it possibly can be, but, you know, very durable and like a good training shoe. You don't need loads of breathability with this. It's obviously not solidly designed for running. The lockdown's super good, and I absolutely love these things on the back of shoes, particularly when you've got like a knit-based shoe, because it's so easy to slide your feet in. And also, like, this seems really durable. So I've always thought when you've got one of these on the back and you're using it all the time and you're slipping in and out, I've always felt that that would eventually kind of rip off, but that hasn't really happened. The stitching is just really solid, and the material is really solid. The other unique and different thing about this shoe compared to any other barefoot shoe that I've had or any other ones that I've seen on the market is they've kind of got this weird plastic heel cuppy thingy that sort of like attaches to the laces. Now, presumably this is designed to give you like a bit more support, a bit more lateral support, and obviously give you a good lockdown, considering it's attached to the laces. But, you know, I haven't really like felt the noticeable effects of that. I don't know if it is making the shoe feel more solid or, you know, more of a, you know, better lockdown. But what I would say is it's definitely not been noticeably bad. It's difficult to say how the shoe would feel without that. So whilst making this video, I was coming to the end of making this video, recording some B-roll, and I was doing some heavy sled work in my session, and the sole just absolutely like snapped apart or got munched up. So it's just unbelievable, me talking about durability of these bad boys, and then like that happens whilst I'm filming B-roll for this video. But to be honest, I'm not surprised. I've worn them so much on an abrasive surface. I've done a lot of training in them, and you can just see it's just the rubber wearing. It's not the fact that it's poor construction or anything like that, or poor materials. It's just, you know, I've been on an abrasive before and it's just worn down over time, and then I'm doing a very heavy load on them and putting a lot of force through them. But because the rest of the shoe is like basically perfectly fine, I'm going to try and send these back to Revivo or Revivo, however you want to say it, and hopefully they can just re-sole it. These are still my favorite shoes. My feet are feeling mad, strong, and stable as ever. I'm going to continue to be barefoot. I have bought some new Vivo Barefoot. I got some boots, which are my first ever pair of like boots, full stop really, for the winter. Keep my feet a bit warmer. I'll do a review on those bad boys. And I've also just signed up for a full Ironman. So I'm gonna have to do some videos on the training for that. So I'll see you in one of those videos soon.